The taxidermist's ledger, gripping hook. You can only call it betrayal if you ever felt trust. But my family? They never bothered with trust. They thrived on derision. The day I unboxed my first reanimated specimen, an owl with glassy eyes, once a part of my meticulous dreams, was the day my mother declared my passion delusional. My father's laughter echoed like a death knell as I stood, fragile and exposed, in the living room of my childhood home. In that moment, the weight of their ridicule cracked something deep inside me. I couldn't help but feel as if I was being hollowed out right before them. I couldn't let it end there. I wouldn't let it. Exile into the unknown and obsessive descent. Years evaporated in the relentless pursuit of answers and validation. I fell into a darker world than I could have imagined, crawling through estate sales and auctions where taxidermy specimens twisted and reformed at the hands of the long-forgotten. Each grotesque figure I catalogued whispered secrets of sin and sorrow, feeding off the forgotten guilt of their past lives. I was a pariah in the field of wildlife conservation, a whisperer of the haunted, a madman with a ledger thick with stories of souls trapped in furry, stiff bodies. My education in wildlife biology hadn't prepared me for the paranormal twists and turns I'd encounter, and my peers had laughed me out of their sacred halls. "Look at him, cataloging ghosts," they scoffed. "He'll end up as a punchline." Their laughter followed me like a shadow, but I pushed deeper into the abyss. Each specimen I uncovered seemed to reflect a darker truth, a stain on the human legacy, a connection to the pain of lives long lost. Weeks turned into months, and the world around me pulsed with energy both exhilarating and terrifying. I became known in dark circles as an expert in the field, receiving invitations to speak about my bizarre findings. Whispers of madness chased me, but I welcomed it. Vindication was tangible. Discovering the truth behind what remained, those who had once lived through guilt and shame, preserved forever as a warning, became my obsessive quest. Horrific trials and dark triumphs, and oh, the horrors I faced. As I catalogued these creatures beneath dim lights, I felt their essence merging with my own. I learned to understand their pain, to hear their stories, those of betrayal, loss, and unyielding guilt. I filled my ledger with tales of those who had wronged and were wronged. It became my lifeline and my burden. One autumn evening, I unearthed a particularly unsettling specimen, a rotting deer, its fibers still pulsing with remnants of what had once been. The moment I touched it, something shifted. I felt a surge of energy, a kind of sinister revelation. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. It spoke of a horror buried deep within my family. The ones who had scorned me. So I returned home, a specter of the past cloaked in knowledge they could never grasp. They had turned their backs on me, but I returned not as a disgrace. I returned as a cautionary tale, the embodiment of what they refused to comprehend. The return and unearthed truth. The air felt cold and electric as I stepped through the threshold of my childhood home. My family could only stare, mouths agape, as I set down the taxidermy deer, now part of my crown of shadows. I watched their expressions morph from shock to horror as the creature's eyes fell upon them. My mother was the first to speak, voice trembling. "What have you done?" She held her breath, as if the very air around us were toxic. "Look closer," I urged, my tone more gravelly than I'd intended. "This is the truth you've laughed at, the darkness you've ignored." Lighting flickered, shadows danced, and I felt a stirring in the room, the deer's presence intertwining with my own. As my gaze locked onto my father, I could see the slow dawning of realization. The deer jerked, its head twitching as if alive, eyes glimmering with lost stories and guilt yet to be uncovered. In that moment, the walls of our home trembled, echoing the laughter from years past. Mockery turned to fear. The air thickened with the weight of our shared history. The traumas we all carried. My family recoiled, raw terror sprawling across their faces. A piercing wail erupted from the deer, as if it had finally found its voice, unleashing years of wrongdoing, of family secrets, of denied truths. It was a cacophony of despair that engulfed the room, attacking every nerve as they realized. The tales I shared were not just fictitious. They were warnings, reflections of their own moral decay. Final reflection. I stood there, heart pounding, as the sounds of regret swirled around me. My family finally understood. Their disbelief had a cost. They had mocked my obsession, yet here I was, the harbinger of their reckoning. They were no longer safe from what they had shunned, but I was no longer held captive by their ignorance. As the noise crescendoed, I knew I had achieved more than mere recognition. I had survived where they could not. With a shudder, the deer sank back into stillness, eyes vacant once again, but the lesson lingered. I turned to leave, their horrified faces still burned into my mind. My ledger would forever hold the echoes of betrayal, a testament to those who choose to remain blind. I stepped back into the darkness, a shadow among shadows, carrying the weight of my truth, a truth no longer hidden, but hauntingly alive. And the last thing I heard before closing the door was the sound of their gasps, a reminder that sometimes the things we dare to mock come back for the very ones who refuse to see.